Signore e signori, buonasera. Benvenuti. Welcome to Casa Italiana, zerilli-marimò. This is a great evening. When my colleague Eugenio Refini told me of the possibility of having the Gesualdo Six here at the Casa, I couldn't believe my ears, because it's one of these rare moments for me of spiritual uplifting, of clarity, of beauty. When you scroll down through social media, in particular Instagram, that's where I met them. And it's always a beautiful present when a new piece that they perform appears on my feed in Instagram. And I strongly suggest you all start following them, because every now and then you will receive this pill of well-being, of beauty, of perfection, of harmony. And I think we all need that every day in our lives. So I'm going to leave to Eugenio the chance to introduce them formally. They're here for a great show tomorrow at St. John the Divine. It's already sold out, so it's pointless for me to tell you more details, but maybe they're going to talk about it during the performance. But we have the fortune that tonight, on top of having a conversation with Eugenio, they will also perform some pieces, and we are delighted and very grateful to them. So let me just introduce Eugenio Refini, who is a professor of Italian studies here at New York University, and he's the chair of the Department of Italian Studies. By the way, the youngest chair of department at New York University. And we are proud, because normally Italian is a bit dusty, a bit old, and we have this great chair, very active. And among the many interests that Eugenio entertains, there is the Renaissance, and there is music. He's also a musician. He's a violinist with a diploma sanction from the conservatory. So it's a great chance for us to have together somebody that combines a great knowledge of literature with a great knowledge of music. And he brings that also in his teaching and in all the events that he organizes here for us at Casa Italiana, including a series called Viva Voce that focuses exactly on the voice, the singing voice, the speaking voice, the acting voice, and all the other possible manifestations of the voice. So I think there wouldn't be a better guest or group of guests for Eugenio and his series Viva Voce than Gesualdo Six. Please welcome Eugenio Refini and the Gesualdo Six.
Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. I feel like a kid in a candy shop, really. So I will make the most of this evening. I will treasure it. It's really wonderful to have you all here, and it's also surprising, of course, to know that many people have joined, because, of course, we have something very special in store for Casa's audience tonight. I just would like to thank Stefano very briefly, because the support that Casa Italiana has been giving not only to this event tonight, but also to this Viva Voce series, which you have been running for a few years now, really means a lot to me. Really beyond the kind of financial dimension of it, really believing in this series is something which I cherish. And the idea of this series is really to bring together performers and scholars in conversation to explore how voices from the distant past continue to resonate across time and space. And of course, the most powerful way to check what happens when this happens is through present-day voices. And tonight we have the rare luxury of having not only one, but 6 singers, remarkable singers, whose work does conjure the past in experimental and compelling ways. I'll keep my remarks brief, because we are all eager to hear them, and they're extremely well known. We're very fortunate to have one of the world's foremost vocal ensembles, the Gesualdo Six, the award-winning British group directed by Owen Park. And I will go briefly through the names, because it's always nice to bring names up. So Guy, James, Alistair Austin, Joseph Wicks, Will Wright, and Simon Grant, and Owen Park himself. They're very well known for their imaginative programming and impeccable artistry, and their repertoire spans across Italy, France, of course England, with a primary focus on the Renaissance, but with compelling explorations of contemporary music as well. So in this sense, they are truly imaginative and creative in what they do. Since forming in 2014 in Cambridge, they have performed across the globe, literally. They are now in New York after a US tour, with a different program though, to present the US premiere of Death of Gesualdo tomorrow night at St. John the Divine. As Stefano mentioned, the show is sold out, so that's a good sign, of course, for them and for all of us who are able to go. But too late for people who haven't got a ticket. Well, you might try to go last minute. Given the weather, some people might stay home and you might be able to join the concert anyway. So this will happen tomorrow night as part of the Music Before 1800 series. And I would like to thank the series artistic director, Robbie Mees, because he kindly facilitated my contact with the Gesualdo Six. Alongside their many performances worldwide, they have produced an impressive discography, including, and I'm just bringing up a few titles, English Motets, Josquin's Legacy, Carlo Gesualdo's Tenebrae Responsories, Lux Aeterna, and most recently Radiant Dawn, which I think came out in 2025, right? And I really cannot overstate my gratitude, as they have kindly agreed not only to talk to us, but also to share some music, which is always, such a treat for the audience, and in this case for myself as well. And so I would like to give another round of applause to the Gesualdo Six before we get welcome. So, I've prepared a few questions, and I would like to start perhaps with asking you to give us a brief overview of the history of the ensemble, because that's always a fascinating story to hear, and also to perhaps hear more about how, from the very beginning, then the group has evolved over the years.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Eugenio and the Viva Voce series for hosting us so warmly. It is a great pleasure to be in New York. As musicians, there's no better city. It is awesome. But normally we can only be here for less than 24 hours before we have to move on. So this is a real luxury, to be able to explore the city, to be here talking to you this evening, making more of our visit. And this series is really exciting, and we're so glad to be here, and also to sing a little, to prepare some of you for what you may witness tomorrow. So the seeds of this ensemble were sown many hundreds of years ago. In the UK, we are very lucky because we have in our midst thousands of beautiful churches, and for many centuries they have housed choirs, and singing is as much a fabric of our country as the buildings themselves. And so when many of us were younger, we sang in these buildings, and we developed our musicianship and our experience through our interaction with a tradition that has survived for hundreds of years. And so we came together in 2014 in Cambridge. Many of us studied at the University of Cambridge in various different colleges. If any of you have visited that city, you may be impressed by its architecture. You may have read some of the extraordinary publications that have come out of there over the years. And perhaps you heard some of the music. And in those college chapels, pretty much every day, you can hear and experience music. A lot of it for religious services. Choral evensong is a big staple of the English choral tradition's diet. And then our first concert took place in the March of 2014. And we'll come on to how and when and why a little more, but we sang music by Carlo Gesualdo. And from that moment, the group was born, and we haven't looked back. And it was only 5 years ago when we first came to the United States and performed together that we then developed our relationship with this country. We're now here on our 10th tour. We performed in New York some 5 times, once already at St. John the Divine, and that was our Secret Bird project, which has a very interesting relationship with Death of Gesualdo that we're doing tomorrow. So I thought it might be interesting for you to hear from everyone in the group just a little of their experience, maybe before they joined the ensemble, because it will tell a story of our background and our shared experiences, and also those differences and how they play out together. And I suppose if we start with our highest singers and then work our way down, off we go.
Hello everyone, my name's Guy. I'm the first countertenor in the group. I was there at the beginning. I just graduated from St John's College, Cambridge. I studied natural sciences actually. I did red organic chemistry at university, but was doing a lot of singing. I grew up, my mum's a music teacher. I don't know whether any of you have had that experience, but it meant that I was doomed from an early stage into being a musician, I think. And I sung in my local parish church choir in just a small town called Dursley in Gloucestershire, made famous by J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter's stepdad. And yeah, I've always been singing and have now been singing since the formation of the group full time, which is a great joy.
Hello everyone, I'm Alistair, and I'm one of the other countertenors in the group. Cambridge is sort of the spiritual home for the group, it's where it formed, and lots of us went to university there. But I've got a one-up on the rest of them because I was born there, and I was a chorister there. So I started singing when I was 7 at Jesus College, where they have a programme for children aged 7 to 14 to sing unbroken voices, trebles. So it was a bit like St Thomas, 5th Avenue here, when you got the boy choristers, that similar thing. Lots of us would have done that sort of education from age 7 onwards, really. So I did that until I was 14, and then when I was at university at Cambridge, I continued singing as a countertenor. I learnt that I was a countertenor just a year before. That was a remarkable awakening. I don't know if countertenors are a bit rarer in the States now over here. So anyway, continued singing throughout university and loved it really. I was ostensibly studying politics, but mostly was singing. And then me graduating university coincided with starting at the group. So that was 2.5 years ago in 2023.
Yes.
That's it. And I've had a wonderful time since. This is my 10th tour to the States. No, my 7th tour to the States of 10. So that sort of shows the trajectory that the group's been on over the last few years.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and I'm one of the tenors in the ensemble. I'm another founder member. I was there in 2014. I was a chorister in Salisbury Cathedral, which is a very famous cathedral in the south of the UK. Very lucky to be there. I'm a musician because of my family as well. My father is a tenor and an organist, and so it has transpired for me as well. I've played the organ for a very long time, and that was sort of the focus of my studies, and indeed my early career. But singing was always the hobby, it was always the thing that I enjoyed to do. And here I am doing it now for my career. So that I like to think there's a lesson there for some people perhaps, follow your heart. But I love doing what I do, and it's great to be able to do it with these boys.
Hi everyone, I'm Will. I'm not actually a regular member with the group, I'm an imposter for this tour, I have to say. The other regular tenor, Josh Cooter, his wife had a baby about 10 days ago or so, so naturally he needs to be at home, so I'm very thankful to be filling in for these guys for the last few weeks. I took up singing quite late actually. My family, I'm very blessed that they were very musical, so music was always around when I was young. I learned violin and piano, but I took up singing when I was about 17 or 18 years old. So I'd never sung as a boy treble, which I think is a blessing and a curse. I haven't got some good habits, but I haven't lost some bad habits as well. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate to do that, and then I ended up enjoying it so much to continue singing. I studied music at Bristol University. I moved to London and I've continued to freelance sing since. So thank you for having us.
Hello everyone, I'm Simon. I am the most recent joiner to the group of the regulars, and I'm having a great time. So this is my 9th month, I think, in the group. I joined it's coming up on a year, I suppose. So I started singing also at age 7. I joined my local Abbey Church in Romsey, which is just down the road from Salisbury actually. So Joe and I were quite close. And it was sort of almost by accident really. I don't really know what spurred on the choice to sing in the church. I think it was a family friend had sent their child. And my mum was jealous or something, so I got to go. And shortly after that, I started learning piano as well, and then my parents took me on a holiday to, wouldn't you guess, Cambridge, and went to see an evensong at King's College. And I very strongly remember watching it and thinking that's what I wanted to do. So I sort of set my sights on a choral scholarship at Cambridge, and then worked sort of up through my teens in other sort of choirs and school choirs and things like that, and just kept my sights set on it. And then went to Truro Cathedral for a gap year, which is another link with the group. Joe also played organ at Truro for a while, which is in Cornwall, in the sort of southwest corner of the UK. And then during that year decided that King's College was actually not all it was cracked up to be, and I went to a different college. So I went to St John's, which is where I met Joe, who was in his final year, and then Ali when I was in my final year. So there's a little bit of a St John's connection as well with the group. And so, yeah, I think that's me. And then
and all of these various strands come together now for the ensemble you see today. So perhaps we should talk a little bit about the composer.
Yes, because of course, the name of the group rings a bell to audiences for various reasons, right? I think Carlo Gesualdo is one of the most important composers of the Italian Renaissance. And what is interesting to me is that, of course, if you think about it from the Italian side, the first thing which comes to mind are the secular madrigals, right? My sense is that you kind of got into Gesualdo through his liturgical music, which of course is another important entry point into what he did. And of course, most famously, perhaps the broader audience, Gesualdo is very kind of well known because of his adventurous life, to say the least. He ended up killing his wife and her lover in a fairly gruesome kind of situation, and of course he wasn't convicted for it, right? And that remained some kind of did remain as a sort of a stain, so to speak, in his profile, and this is also what made him, I think, kind of a romantic figure later on, and of course, this doesn't really impact on the quality of the music, in the sense that the music of Gesualdo is just fantastic, and we will talk perhaps more about it. But we could perhaps address the question, why Gesualdo as your sort of name, beyond the fact that you got together thanks to him in a way.
Well, we can sort of tag team this, Joseph, because I think at some point you've just got to pick, because you need to sell some tickets. And honestly, Gesualdo sells tickets. No, in the first concert we did, we sang his music. You're right, liturgical music, sacred music, tenor responsories, specifically for Maundy Thursday, Feria Quinta. Extraordinary music that we hadn't sung really as individuals before we got together that day. And in Cambridge, there are lots of concerts. They're happening every single day. It happens quickly. You put a concert together almost on 3 hours of rehearsal. We had a little bit more because the music was so difficult. In that process, we enjoyed not only the music itself, but the way that we made that music together. And it was because we were acting more like a string quartet than we were a college chapel choir, because we had individual responsibility for the musical lines themselves, and that agency is exciting to somebody who's musically inclined, but also wants to broaden their horizons. So it came at exactly the right time.
Yeah, I think we just needed a name for the post. That's the thing to say about the name of the group being the Gesualdo Six. There were 6 singers, and we were singing Gesualdo, so go figure. But yes, Owen's absolutely right. I think it was the opportunity to perform that music was not currently present in Cambridge, unless you had the idea yourself. And there's a lot of agency of students to go put on concerts. There are no barriers in the way of putting on a concert as a student at Cambridge. The audience is right there, the student body, rolling out of their rooms at 9 p.m. for a late night concert. And the chapels were there as well. There's 3 venues, and indeed rehearsal spaces. And we were, but the thing that brought us to the music was the way it sounded, and the extraordinary sound picture of the particular work in question, Tenebrae Responsories. We just liked a recording of that piece, and we wanted to see how it went, and put a team together of singers, and here we are 12 and a half years, 12 years later. It's been an amazing ride, I have to say.
The music itself, and we're going to sing some for you a little bit later on, because we can talk about it a lot, and we'll talk about biography and history, but until you hear it, it doesn't quite make sense. And in our programmes, even if we're not singing music by Gesualdo, we are inspired by the sound that can be created when you have that agency in those individual lines. And composers over centuries have sought to emulate his writing, and we try in our programming to bring that excitement, that experimentation to whatever we're singing, so that the group sounds like the group. And if we come on the airwaves, then it's us, and it's brought together by those early formative experiences, but then we've taken that through our entire journey and tried to incorporate those singers that have joined us along the way into that excitement and into that sound.
This is all so fascinating, and it kind of brings me to a follow-up question, which is really about the sort of double identity when it comes to your training in the choristers tradition, this glorious tradition of choral music, which is so deep-rooted in the English musical world. And then, of course, when we talk about Gesualdo, but also about other authors, you don't only do English music, right? And this is a question which perhaps is of special interest to friends and colleagues in performance practice, because there's so much debate about how these early music should be performed, and one could even argue that a group with a training such as yours wouldn't necessarily approach a given repertoire in the same way in which a group trained, say, in Italy, in France, or in Germany would do. So I'm curious to hear more about how your multiple identity when it comes to bringing your British upbringing as singers in relationship to the other repertoires, and in particular the Italian one.
I'm happy to speak a little bit on that. There are these sort of the proposed dualities, I think, in the singing that we do, and lots of people in England would think that if you learn in a church, you're not going to sing as properly as you might do if you learn to sing in a sort of Italian kind of conservatoire and sing opera and things like that. And you hear this quite a lot. And what I think is interesting is all of us have appreciation for all the styles of singing that I think there are, not even just in classical as well. But what we try and do is be as appropriate as we possibly can for the music. So, for example, with Gesualdo in particular, it's been said already, it's really hard. I mean, it's not easy, it's not straightforward. In order to make it sound good, you have to be quite particular about where you place certain notes. He was really obsessed with tuning and temperament, and that is the kind of stuff that we get taught a lot about as British church singers, which is not so much the focus of kind of maybe other practices around the world. And so that is one of our advantages. However, we also, as Owen has already mentioned, get to sing on our own parts. We have individuality, which is kind of a nice bridge between the sort of characterful, operatic, maybe style of some maybe Italian places and the church style where lots of people will be singing on your part. So we get to sit sort of in the middle of those two schools and get to use elements of both. So we get to use the sort of tuning expertise that we have, but also we like to sing with a little bit more kind of edge or spice, or all these kinds of terms that are more individual. So I think that is my way of thinking about the work we do, sitting between those two worlds.
It's probably also worth just speaking a bit about the forces that we use in the group. The reason that we have two countertenors, two tenors, a baritone and a bass is those are the forces required to sing Gesualdo's Tenebrae Responsorius Maundy Thursday. That's what a lot of chapel choirs in Italy looked like in the Renaissance. We know that through various historical forms, but even if we didn't know which singers were where and being paid what, which thankfully we do, we would know it just by looking at the score, I think, for Gesualdo. And that fundamental authenticity, I think, means that our performance of Gesualdo, in many ways, our lineup is actually more suitable to European Renaissance music than it might be to English music. When we were saying we were growing up in choirs with boy trebles on the top, actually countertenors in England tend to sing a bit lower and tend to be a subordinate medius part. And so when we take on English Renaissance polyphony, sometimes we have to do more adjustment than we would do for European Renaissance polyphony. So it's quite interesting in that regard. But even then, you can, I think, tell in the music of Bird, for example, a composer we've studied lots and performed a lot and recorded a lot of. Even then, you can tell that the mountains and the channel weren't that much of a barrier to that kind of distribution of music. And indeed, as we've been discovering through various different projects and repertory recently, a lot of what inspired Gesualdo to write for those forces really has its roots set in French music of the 1400s and in the continent's angloise, which is music that got taken over to Italy from England in the 1300s. So it's very easy to identify these things in modern day terms by saying that's Italian, that's French, and this is English. But really, they're very blurred terms when we start looking in detail, I think.
Thank you, which I think is so interesting because, of course, it tells us a lot about how, again, these voices have been heard over the centuries, right? One of the reasons why we put together this series was really to think about what it means to be thinking about the voice as a living thing, even beyond the death of the people who have been singing, right? And of course, Viva Voce means both, lively voice, but also, a voice which continues to live. And so one question which I like to ask to the singers whom we get to have here, and which applies of course to your case as well, has to do with how do you think about your own relationship to the voices which came first? In a way, of course, we could come back to Gesualdo, but this applies to Bird, Josquin, anything you sing really. The idea that your voices now are partly redoing something which others have done before, and we don't really have a way to truly get a sense of what those voices sounded like, right? Because the kind of technology of reproduction is a fairly recent matter in this narrative. And so, is there a way to think about this temporal, chronological relationship?
Well, I think, as you say, we don't have any recordings of people singing in 1600, which is a shame. However, or not, as the case may be. However, we have the score in musical notation, so it's like time travel. I think that if you go and hear perhaps a group like us or some other consorts sing music from the English Renaissance or Gesualdo, Palestrina, it is as close a thing as we can get to what people will have experienced with their ears at that time. And that is a truly remarkable thing that we try and remember when we sing this music. And it's why we go to the Renaissance polyphony, is because of the fact that we sang that first in our first concert, and that's the reason why we are the forces that we are, is that we are really well suited to that repertoire, which then opens the door to be incredibly authentic, hopefully, as to what it would have been. We can obviously interpret the music differently to other colleagues in the industry. They'll have ideas about how it goes. That's about the vagueness of the musical notated form. You know, we can imbue any dynamic, any emotion that we would like. Obviously, there are things that are perhaps that might come forth from certain pieces more than others. But that's something to be celebrated as well, is the variety of approaches.
What I also think is interesting is that we have the ability to listen to other singers, and they do it differently in Italy, and we've worked with those Italian singers. And they do it differently in New Zealand, and we've worked with some Samoan singers. And learning from these different traditions, because a lot of this, especially that New Zealand, the Samoan music's been passed down orally, we do get a little bit of a sense of that there are different ways to sing and different ways to sound. So there is an authenticity in terms of what type of voice we're using, but really we're trying as best as we possibly can to sound good in our own instrument. And then the job there is for us to come together as a collective and to make our best sound. So part of that comes down to how we program, where we're singing, and who's singing. And that's why when someone like Will comes in to support us, we have to choose the right person, because we can't get any old tenor to come in, you know. We really did try. But it's really important because it's a natural instrument, and we're trying not to create a sound that we think was what they did. We're trying to create the sound now in our best way possible, using what we know about the music and the language to support that and to create the best experience for you, the audience. So it's a blending of everything, I think.
A final point I'll just say to summarise that is that we're not historically informed performance purists. It's not an attempt to recreate how it would have sounded 400 years ago. So what is informing how we sing it? The boys have already spoken about this, but it's using our 21st century musical instincts that we've inherited over the 400 years of education that we've all had. So it's not a conscious thing of how would it have sounded. It's in a way quite a subconscious thing.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is really interesting, and of course it has to do with the fact that what you do again is done sort of here and now, right? And there's no way to really. I think the paradoxical thing here, and this is my own thinking, so people don't necessarily have to agree, but my thinking is that this time traveling quality of what you do in your profession and in your art is really that you do it while being very well grounded here, right? So you do that with your bodies, with your voices, with your mouths, and with your training, which of course is also inheriting centuries of things which have been piling up. And this process is certainly something which I think we seldom think about in a deep way. And perhaps that's an invitation to all of us, especially music lovers, to think about the fact that as much as the tradition is important, what happens in the performance setting is happening now, right? And perhaps one question before we listen to some beautiful music, and also to getting kind of attuned with it, is about dissonance, which we also picked as our keyword tonight. Because of course, one of the typical things which we happen to read about late 16th century, early 17th century Italian music in particular, Gesualdo for sure comes up as a key reference here, is this new way of treating dissonance. It comes up with Marenzio, it comes up with Monteverdi, but certainly Gesualdo is quite often remembered as a master of dissonance. And can you tell us a little bit about perhaps Dissonance 101, sort of a very brief explanation to prepare our audience, and then what are your thoughts about why this dissonance fever around 1600?
I mean, I'm no expert in this matter, but I'm going to give a brief go at what makes Gesualdo special for me as a singer coming into this. I think it's from our use to of English Renaissance polyphony, hearing false relations and imperfect cadences, and how the music, you think it's going to cadence and finish, and it just somehow manages to find a way to carry on. With Gesualdo, it's not necessarily the dissonance, although that is an enormous part of it, to emote and yearn for those moments, but it's the unexpected So there's moments where you think the music has to go this way, but he just goes, no, it's that way. You know, and it's the complete unexpected nature of it that I find fascinating. Even if you know it really well, you find that each time you sing it, there's another bit that you haven't noticed before, and that's what makes that special. And being more familiar with it certainly is something that you can never learn enough about it. You think you know it, but you sing it one more time with a different set of singers who sings this line in a different way, and suddenly something new is discovered. There's so many layers and textures to the music that there's always something else for you to discover, I find.
One of the ways of looking at the historical perspective of this, actually, and we might come back to this later, is the ability of composers in the 1500s with the Renaissance and with the invention of the printing press to be able to codify very specifically what they want. So quite a lot of the dissonance that you hear in the music before the time of Gesualdo, before about 1520, is transmitted in manuscripts, which can be edited by whoever's writing them, very rarely the composer. And quite a lot of the dissonance that you find in those pieces is ambiguous because it's the result of musica ficta, it's the result of performance practices where it's being performed, not where it's being written. So in the 1500s, suddenly you have composers being able to disseminate exact copies of what they want, and what they write down becomes quite different. So Gesualdo uses a lot of accidentals in his music to very specifically get the singers to sing the exact pitches that he wants. And that comes around with other developments in understanding of the actual physics of the music that we're listening to as well, and in tuning practices and things like that. And that's why a lot of this stuff is exploding in the late Renaissance. And I'd say that a lot of the chromaticism is really coming about because at this point, as a composer, you have this ability to present yourself publicly, and you have a selection of things. You can't write necessarily dynamics, so you can't represent yourself on the page by saying sing this quietly or sing that loudly. That hasn't been developed yet. But something you can put across and show your mastery and show off to your friends, basically, is your control over harmonic and chromatic expression. So it's a tool for expression, really. And that's certainly where it is in Gesualdo, because he's trying to show off to all these other Italian composers that have come before him, specifically at Ferrara in Italy. And that's kind of why this explosion happens at this point, I think.
Very briefly, I don't know how familiar many of you are with the sort of actual techniques, but it might just be worth just pointing out one quick thing that is different about Gesualdo's form of dissonance, which often comes on sort of strange, I'm going to use the word concatenation, I don't know why, but when you put a juxtaposition of two chords together next to each other, rather than polyphonic lines, which is what a lot of the lines will be, where lots of things are moving at the same time. Sometimes homophonically, he'll put a chord down and then a different chord down that you don't expect. Now, the way he does this is often by a shared note in each chord, but the other notes don't fit within the sort of general tonal centre that you've just been in. So there'll be a moment where we perform something where we'll sing lots of polyphony. Maybe Owen will point it out before we sing it, and then we sing homophonic chords that only change slightly, but it sounds really weird. And it's an amazing technique that English composers would use, like Vaughan Williams would use this technique hundreds of years later to use voice leading to create these sounds. But I can't think of another composer from before that time that was doing this kind of technique of creating dissonance.
Thank you. Well, then I guess that on that note, perhaps we can listen to something.
So it's time for us to sing. Okay. What we're going to do for you today, this is an exclusive. You'll be pleased to hear. So we're going to sing some moments from Gesualdo's oeuvre, and also how they appear in our show that we're doing tomorrow, where the creative director of the project, Bill Barclay, has made decisions about which moments in the music we are performing to tell a story on the stage. But this helps us now because it means we can present a wide variety of different musical moments, but in a very succinct way for you this evening. So our first excerpt is going to be Resta di darmi noia. Now it's just a short little moment, but this is actually the homophony that Simon was just talking about. If we wanted to, we could all sing our individual lines for you. They wouldn't sound very good. It's the way that he stacks the chords together. And I think you were touching on that. In the next extract that we're going to sing, a madrigal, the lines are much more coherent. And if we sang them to you, I think they'd sound quite pretty. And it's an earlier work of his, and it feels very much in the tradition that he was inheriting, rather than one which he was trying to be progressive with. So from his secular writing to his sacred, now he wrote two versions of O Vos Omnes, one for 6 voices, a later version for the tenore responsories, and this one which came before for 5 voices. And in fact, this was the first piece of Gesualdo I encountered, because it was published in quite a famous book called European Sacred Music, and that was edited by John Rutter. Of course, I mean, who else? But the reason it's helpful is because it means that in the UK at least, singers who work together know who Gesualdo is. It's sometimes difficult to have that kind of purchase when you don't have a piece like this one, because it's a little bit more accessible than some of his other writings, so choirs at least attempt it. But this is now going to be a bit of both worlds. We're going to have some polyphonic writing that creates dissonance through the interweaving lines, and then we're going to have some chords that sit right next to each other, which the voice leading individually is not the most pleasant, but the way that it creates and expands the harmony is a joy. So we're going to conclude this little set that we're bringing to our talk this evening with the second part of a madrigal, Se così dolce è il duolo. And in the performance tomorrow, one of the joys of presenting this music, we should talk about this in a moment, is how we are using our bodies in the stagecraft to sing in different positions and to show the audience a different side to what we would usually do, which is standing here like this, very normally. And it's bringing the music into the 21st century to keep it alive for the next 100 years. Well, we could just sing it in concerts like anyone else, but this is something that we feel passionate about and bringing in a new audience for this music. So you'll hear in this one how he uses the voices and pushes their ranges a little more. I saw some of your eyebrows go a little higher when you heard some high notes from the countertenors there. More unusual voices at this side of the Atlantic. But we also have this richness in the lower three parts, and it's the way that he blends the textures together, which I think makes this move particularly interesting. The biggest difference between venues, I think, is today and tomorrow.
Yes.
But you've been wonderful, thank you. I hope the audience is as nice.
Well, thank you so much for sharing these beautiful moments of music, and I guess we've all got a taste of the beautiful set of pieces you are sharing tomorrow night, and more broadly, the kind of things you do. So perhaps, since we are getting a little teaser of the program tomorrow, it would be interesting to hear more about this project, because it's not a regular concert performance, as some of you may know already. It's really meant to be a theatrical concert, which will include dancers, puppets, and so it's really meant to tell a story. And this is not the usual way in which this kind of repertoire, either the liturgical or the secular madrigal repertoire, is typically performed. And certainly it's not the way in which it was performed at the time. So it's really one example of how creative can be the modern reinvention to some extent of early music. And so perhaps can we just begin by hearing more about the concept behind Death of Gesualdo and what we should be expecting.
Yeah, I'll take this. I'll begin by saying that it started really with a project that preceded Death of Gesualdo called Secret Bird. That's the project we performed last in St John the Divine a couple of years ago, and it's directed by a man called Bill Bartley, who's pioneering concert ideas for, in this case, early music that isn't six of us standing on stage in suits performing. And there is a big movement within our world at the moment of trying to find different imaginative ways to engage audiences. And what Bill's doing is amazing, I think, in achieving that. So Secret Bird is an immersive, semi-theatrical, semi-staged production which features the music of William Byrd. A contemporary, is that right, of Gesualdo? And so it's very much those seeds were sown in that project, and it's not the same as Secret Bird by any stretch, but there's through lines between the two. Principally, it's not us standing on stage in a horseshoe. It's us moving around the stage alongside dancers and actors and puppets. So it's very exciting. And a large dramatic element of the show, which tells the story of Gesualdo's life and death, is tableau vivant, which is a Renaissance pastime art form of reenacting, I think, paintings. Is that right? Yeah. And it's amazing to watch it. We have the luxury of being up close and personal whilst they're pulling this thing off, because they're standing in frozen positions for minutes at a time, and it's really hard. And they do a remarkable job with it. So there's that element, and there's also this Caravaggio-inspired stuff, which is the use of light to illuminate different elements of that tableau that we're seeing in front of us. So we hold these little LED things, and basically shine a spotlight on the subject. They become the light becomes part like an actor in the show. I don't know if
but and it has music at its heart. So the music, there's no speech in this production at all, and the music breathes life into these paintings that are created. And the exciting thing for us as performers is we are part of those paintings, sometimes observing, sometimes lighting, and sometimes as structural elements where our voices mingle with the visual to create an image beyond which we could usually achieve with our voices. And having now performed this in London, in York, we're bringing it to New York, and I'm hopeful that this won't be the only time that we do it in the US. You never know. But I think it's a story that has captured people for a long time, Gesualdo's biography, and there have been films, TV series, and even other shows. But what Bill, I think, manages to do better than anyone else is to make people think and question themselves and what they feel about the music and its creator. And I think perhaps we should touch on that because it is so important, and the story that we are telling is Gesualdo's life, and of course we can sing the music and you don't see the biography, but in the show you do.
Right. Well, thank you, because I think this is a very important part of the story we're telling tonight. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, well, first of all, Gesualdo was an aristocratic person. He was a prince, right? So we already have an interesting figure of someone who's not a typical composer when we think about the time period. But then, of course, a very adventurous life. As I said, of course, he was a man of letters, but also a man of arms, and mostly remembered in terms of his biography because of this murderous event, which happened in 1590. Right? So it's really the years when Caravaggio is also active, and yet another artist whose biographical trajectory is far from let's say unproblematic, right? And in the case of Gesualdo, what happens is that, as I said earlier, he basically finds out that his wife Maria d'Avalos was having an affair with Fabrizio Carafa. I mean, all people belonging into the high sort of ranks of society, and the reaction to this event was really killing them both in a pretty gruesome way, and this event has really marked the biography of him for the modern audiences, but one could imagine for Gesualdo himself, right? And I think we do have evidence of these sort of struggles as early as in the last years of his life. And so the question here would be how rethinking about his life through the lens of a work such as Death of Gesualdo has allowed you guys to also reckon a little bit with the peculiar nature of this person and his profile at a biographical level.
Absolutely. I think that certainly when I was growing up and I knew that one piece that we've just spoken about, O Vos Omnes, because I'd sung it in a choir, and when you're young and you can only take in so much, I think I was desperately trying to get the notes right at the time. You don't always have time to take in a lot of the biography of these composers. The names kind of whiz by you, kind of Palestrina, okay, great, that sounds like that, and this is Gesualdo and it sounds very different. And maybe the one piece of information that I would have taken from Gesualdo at that point would have been that he's a murderer, and that is quite, for us as English singers, that's newsworthy. But honestly, at the time that Gesualdo is working, it's not necessarily the most surprising thing about an aristocrat's biography, Fontanelli, the composer that was sent to go and collect him so he could marry his second wife, was also a composer who murdered his first wife. So, like, and Tromboncino, indeed, a composer that inspired Gesualdo. There are other people, as you said, with Caravaggio as well. And I think it's very easy, certainly when we were starting, to associate the fact that this is kind of murderous music and the fact he'd murdered someone, and that was a very easy kind of single point to put in his life and say, tortured music, tortured life, simple, game over. But one of the lovely things about this project, I think, is digging a little bit deeper into that process, and something that Bill's done sterling work with, and being able to think about actually the fact that some of the most pleasant music that Owen was talking about when we sung with the nicer lines and that sort of thing, that's still written 4 years or published 4 years after the murders. So it's not like the axe comes down and then suddenly the music's got blood all over it. He is working as a composer, he's establishing himself in this world, which he's doing after the murders. And then the biography changes. It's actually the second marriage where he goes, travels across Italy to Ferrara, meets composers who are experimenting in this style. That really, you can see the kind of the gear change in his composition. And there's lots of other elements to his biography that will be spelt out in tomorrow's show, I think. Which it is very useful to have kind of at the back of your mind when you're seeing the show, because as Owen said, there's no kind of explainer to it. And actually the only language, the only vernacular we hear is Italian and Latin, the only language that we can understand. In it is Italian, as I say. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get under the skin of our namesake.
The thoughts that come to mind for me are about the fascination that the public has with people that have done amazing pieces of art but have also been maybe... Well, the question that Bill poses is, what do we do with the art of odious people? So the word odious is Bill's word. I think it's a good one. There is a film coming out this year about Michael Jackson. There is a stage show about him. People still listen to him every year. It's sort of undeniable that his influence on pop music, on all this stuff, not just music as well, dance, etc. And there is still there's huge fascination with it. I think the angle that Bill's taking with this project, and about perhaps the film that's going to come out about Michael Jackson, is that what do we do is not a question that we can answer, but it's one that we have to pose within ourselves and make some kind of decision about. I have said to people I sing with this group, and then they hear what happened and they say, why do you name the group after that man? And well, we have an answer for that, but that's because we've worked it out. I think there are obvious things you could say about how Gesualdo is no longer profiting from our work. He's been dead for a while, but there are other questions about what monetary value can be sent to people who are still alive and have done things that we consider to be odious. But that's not something that we are necessarily focusing on, but is a part of it. So I think it's a conversation piece, and I've actually watched the show because Will stepped in for me so that he could prepare for this patch with Josh, and so I've watched it, and I came away sort of A, having really enjoyed it, well done boys, but B, thinking I think sometimes you come away from a concert that we might do, and we get lovely comments from people saying, I feel very much at peace, and that's great. We absolutely love that. But we're not trying to do that here. We're trying to make you think a little bit more than what we usually might do.
Thank you. Would you like to add something? I think I perhaps have one last question before we open it to the audience, because I want to give everybody a chance to ask questions. But this last question really stems in part from what was just been said, which has to do with theater. I mean, as we have already said, this is not a traditional concert version of Gesualdo's music. It's not a traditional theatrical piece, neither. And when I was thinking about and I haven't seen it yet. So my question really kind of stems out of curiosity. But when I was thinking about the idea of bringing the life of Gesualdo on stage through his music, it came to my mind one very interesting statement from the 17th century by a music theorist at the time, Giovan Battista Doni, who was very well known to some people in this room. And Giovan Battista Doni, at some point, talking about music for the theater, he says, interestingly enough, that the opera composers of the time should actually look at Gesualdo as an example of what dramatic music can be. I'm simplifying a little bit the quote here, but just for the sake of making it as clear as possible. So he's kind of telling opera composers, hey guys, do look at Gesualdo, because his music is the kind of music which has the dramatic force which is needed on stage. And so I'm wondering whether working in a theatrical way around his music, a statement such as Giovan Battista Doni's make any sense to you?
I mean, certainly, I won't speak on it too long because it may not make sense, but certainly as a single voice ensemble with our heritage and tradition, there can be an assumption that using the V word, vibrato, is something that some British choirs, sometimes with learning with treble voices or single voice or even larger choirs, can be red carded, totally banned. But certainly we found, not that we've spoken about it too much in rehearsal, but the instinct to add drama and emotion to singing this music is really, really apparent, because it's just written in there for you. And I found that certainly that it's just a colour that you find together, and the default word, vibrato and adding colour and emotion can easily, there is so much drama and energy and immediacy in this music that it's very hard to just not have that constant, even if you're singing quietly and controlled, there is this constant sort of fire within you that this music, and especially the way that Bill portrays this in this project, it's just every movement, no matter, you could think that you're listening to 10 different composers when you hear this show. It's quite staggering.
There's something about the music itself which, as a musician, you crave to be in a flow state, which is when you're not thinking about the notes on the page, but you're not even really thinking, it's just happening, and it's almost like the music overtakes you. And it's, in my experience singing with the group, the composer that most regularly allows me to get into that state is Gesualdo. And I hope that we conveyed some of that just there, that it is that, it's almost a primal sense of conveying emotion through the music. And so in that way it is highly dramatic, it's highly emotionally charged, it's opera in some ways.
Yeah, I think we all are keen to speak on this point, because we sing a lot of music that isn't by Gesualdo, and we spend most of our time doing that, I would say, these days. But it's always good to return to it, because it does influence everything we do, and it's the most challenging music that we sing, regardless of some quite complex new music that we have sung in our time, naming no names, lickety. But it's to do with the way that he writes for voices on an individual level that is so well accomplished, and so he clearly knew what he was doing in terms of writing for singers specifically, because it is so well written and so well sort of wedded to the emotion of the text, and to actually breathe these lines that he writes on an individual level involves you at your most total. 100% is required of your soul, as well as all of your singing technique and knowledge of music, to kind of bring this music to life. It's the most complete expression, I think, of the Gesualdo Six, is when we sing the music. I can't find a better way of putting it to everything.
Well, this is, I think, a perfect way of closing our discussion here. I mean, the idea of the affetti, right? The emotions as being kind of truly crucial to this repertoire, I think, is paramount here. But we do have, some time for questions from the audience, so perhaps I can get the mic around. Please, yes.
How extensive?
We need the mic.
How extensive was the vetting process to enable you to get such a synergy of voices?
Well,
The only thing about
no, it depends on who you ask. It was, well, I think I touched on this earlier, but it's really important that we have the right 6 people. But that can change, because as people move on from the group, you can't. It's not replacing like for like. It's about being complementary. And so I'm interested in people who are able to make lots of different sounds, all of them good, but who have versatility, who are able to communicate with their instruments without speaking about it. There obviously needs to be a high level of musical understanding, but you don't need to be perfect in any regard. You just need to be willing to work at it and to practice and to listen. There are many skills that we have when we're not singing that are very valuable. And you consider the amount of time that we spend on the road together as well. That there are a lot of different facets to the job, apart from just being the instruments that you hear on the stage. So there's the vetting process is one of listening in many different ways, and of kind of adapting over the years. And then there we are. Thank you.
the thing about the work, just quickly, is that I think that we fundamentally need people that love doing it. And I think that we all love doing this in maybe different facets of it, but if you love it, then it doesn't feel quite so much, or not always, like work, and that means that it becomes possible. It's only possible by loving it.
Thank you for that question. Should we have another one?
This may be a strange question and some insight into my mind, but, and you may not know the answer. I was wondering, in the performance tomorrow, from what era and from what geographic location do the puppets come?
Oh, very good question. There was an interview with the person who made the puppet the other day, wasn't it? Yeah. I think we're meeting them tomorrow, actually, because we weren't able to this time round. So I would be much better able to answer your question tomorrow, I'm afraid. All I can tell you is the puppet is the star of the show.
That's why I asked the question.
Well, exactly, because it's there as the puppet is many things. It's Gesualdo in youth. It's embodying his mind and his spirit, and then we use it in a variety of different ways through the show. But that's, as I say, I think we'll discover more about that tomorrow. And there is an interview with the designer of the puppet, which has been released on the Music Before 1800 and Concert Theatre Works page, I think in the last week. Any other questions? I'm glad over here. I was going to say, I don't think we've answered everything, surely not. We've tried.
Another kind of funny question, but do you think it may change from 6 to 7 or 8?
Ali, you want to take that one?
Well, Josh has had a kid last week, so it's been 18 years. That's all I got.
We started, I conducted the first concert, so we actually had 7 of us for a while. And when we were touring, that was fine, because in England, the biggest car you can get is 7 seats.
Yeah.
And so we're on the road. I mean, where do you put the suitcases? I mean, don't start. It was a nightmare. However, it gave us the ability to sing some pieces like Miserere Nostri of Thomas Tallis, Chi Metta Lotto by, what was that, Vecchi or someone else? Yeah, which was a 7-part madrigal. Did he win all the money? No. And it it was also helpful because then when somebody wasn't feeling so good, we automatically had 6 people, so we could just do the same concert program. It was really very useful. But it wasn't practical, A, because we were called the Gesualdo Six, and I must say I was very fed up with the amount of questions we got about that. It was a discussion, it was a topic starter and also an ender for me. But it was mainly a practical thing. So when Sam, who was our bass for 7 years, left, I stepped in to sing full time, and that's made a lot of sense. And it's slightly changed the way that we make music together, because then there's no one sort of projecting a musical vision above others. It's a very much an egalitarian process when we're on stage, which is a great way of making music, and I think people really, audiences react super well to that. So it's been a very positive shift, and I don't think we would change from 6 as a default, because 6 is, I think, the magic number for this repertoire, but we obviously sometimes have to perform with a different number depending on what we are doing on the day.
Yes, to be clear, we still get the question when we put up a video with 4 singers in it, and the character called the Gesualdo Six, we still get the question, why are there only 4 of you, that kind of thing. So that question, I think, will follow us around, I'm afraid.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah.
That's what we think. Thank you very much. Do we have another question? Right on the front row down here.
This is more of a curiosity, but are you on your iPads looking at just your part or everybody's part?
Yeah, I mean, on today we were singing from school, full scores, so we had every part there. In lots of music from the Renaissance, that is not what you see. And for Secret Bird, which is the project that we did before Death of Gesualdo, we actually sang from facsimiles of the original part books for Bird's Mass for 5 voices, which was an extraordinary thing to do. They are freely available actually online, you can go and have a look. And if you get 5 people together over a dinner or something, you could give it a go. And it's challenging for us because it's not what we're used to basically, but it is what they would have had. So it's pretty extraordinary to put yourself in the shoes of those people in that way.
I think you sing it differently, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Do we find that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We know. I mean, I don't know how string quartet players can do it when they only see their part, and they have to a point.
Yeah.
I mean, the rehearsal process must be a nightmare.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how that works. So we're very lucky to be able to see as we go along who am I listening to there, and it does refine that process so much quickly.
I was just going to say, that education that we all had as choristers, that you learn looking at everyone else's music and the other parts, what their music is, and you rely on that, you come to rely on that. And actually, when I did Secret Bird, I wished that I'd had some experience as an orchestral instrumentalist, because there you've got to really back yourself. You're counting out those bars rest, and you really back yourself off the 5th beat, yeah, you're coming in.
Interestingly, Gesualdo is one of the first composers to be published in score. And I think that's actually represented in the way that you sing it as well. When we talk about that homophonic and those chords next to each other, sometimes having that vision saves you probably quite a lot of rehearsal time, even in 1620. And so he was right at the forefront of that publishing style. Some of those were published during his life, some of them afterwards. But he was really on the turning point of when it became suddenly desirable to be able to see what everyone was doing. Yeah, I think he was definitely thinking that way as well.
And normally we would perform from paper scores, because actually we feel as though that gives us a little bit more, we're touching the history a little closer there. But the iPads are for Death of Gesualdo because they turn all the lights off. We can't see otherwise. It's all part of the show. Thank you for that.
Watching football as well.
Any more? Any further questions? Oh, there's another one on the front row here.
Yes.
Yes, here comes the microphone so that everyone can hear. Thank you.
Thank you. A little question which is more a curiosity. This music is so difficult to perform. I would like to know if there is one piece that for you has been more challenging than others, and why, or maybe for one voice in particular, or for the 6 of you, just to know about how what we do when music is really really demanding. The musical writing is really demanding, and sometimes
It's
you
a challenge,
might
isn't it?
be, discouraged. Or sometimes I'm asking this question because I used to work with performers, and I've been working on madrigals by Gesualdo, and sometimes the performers, they say, oh, maybe this is so strange, might be an error, are we sure that he meant exactly that? But at the end we say, okay, let's do it, let's try to do it as it's written. But sometimes you ask yourself if the writing is correct, if it's exactly what the composer wanted to do.
Yeah, we certainly do that. But one of the things that we're lucky is that our musical expertise and level is very similar, and therefore that helps us create a baseline for all of our work together. And when we practice, we are, for Death of Gesualdo, Joseph created the scores for it, and that was not only excellent because he did a wonderful job, but also meant that we could check things more thoroughly and make sure that we had it all pretty much ready to go for when we started singing together. And so we felt good about that. And so most of our rehearsal process is then geared towards our interpretation, our understanding of the music and the text, and how we want to sing it, rather than that sort of that sense of trepidation around making that music together. But even in Joseph's fantastic score, you sometimes discover things that you just don't believe are correct, and most of the time they are, but occasionally he gets them wrong.
I would also say, oh sorry Joe, I'm jumping in. Sorry. I would also say that the challenge is as much a technical, lots of different colours are required of you over the course of the 80 minutes. And there's not much break, there's not much time to relax and chill out. So it's being able to deliver that as you are happy with and as you want to, as the group interpretation requires over that 80 minutes. So that is in a way the bigger challenge.
Yeah, all I was going to say is just, I said earlier, the challenge of singing Gesualdo is unlike any other music. It is, however, still an enormous pleasure to sing the music, and that makes it actually quite easy in a way, because you're having a good time. And we know the style, and we sort of are well versed in it over a number of years. Sometimes the challenge for us is when we get presented with something very, very different to what we're used to, and you have to get your head around all sorts of very complex things that we don't come across very often. I mentioned Ligeti earlier. We sing some of his pieces called the Nonsense Madrigals. If you don't know those, go look them up. They are amazing. And if you can see a score, even better. Yes, I don't really want to see a score of that for a while, to be honest. It's a bit of a brain ache, shall we say.
But we like being challenged, and I think that the experience of performing Ligeti helps us when we perform something else, because we are, if we sit and do the same thing every day, we will not be as excited about it tomorrow.
A small technical thing in terms of the range. Gesualdo asked for extremities of range from pretty much every single part. There were some very low notes thrown, also some very high notes. The countertenor is very high, and I think that is a way that we can understand the forces that he's writing for as well, because he only uses that when he understands the voices that he's writing for and these voices. And that's quite different with the madrigals, because potentially he's writing for some of the first professional female singers, Concerto della Donna e Ferrara in his own court. And you can tell that the tessitura of certainly the second part down changes and is different according to the different book where he's publishing it, things like that. So that's the level that we're able to work at by understanding the music that influenced him, the choirs of the places that he was performing it, and also by performing this music a lot. You were talking operatic earlier. There's a point of Joe's part, actually, in the final Tenebrae responsories, where on the word libera, where we're talking about being freed from the depths of despair, Joe's part just goes randomly a third higher than any other moment, and it goes up to a tenor high C, which is Pavarotti-esque, absolutely, and ahead of his time. But he's very clearly, specifically chosen that moment. And when you transpose that music and you perform it with a big choir, maybe with women singing the top part, the detail of those middle parts is lost, and a lot of the internal balancing of those chords, which is so carefully considered in Gesualdo, changes. So that's something that we explore all the time as we perform it, but it's very interesting for us, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Eugenio, is that?
Yes, I think we are really, it's 8 and it's our typical way to wrap things up. I just would like to thank you so much for being with us tonight, for gracing us with your music and your knowledge. It's been such a pleasure. If you wish to bring a little bit of the Gesualdo Six home, there are CDs on sale upstairs. So while
Not only CDs, because I appreciate not all of you have CD players now.
But still,
maybe some of you do. But we also have tote bags as well. They look really good with your academic journals and music copies, I promise you. So come and find us.
Right, so thank you very much. Let's thank the Gesualdo Six once again.